It's the 21st.
You're correct.
This is Don Levinson, Deputy Chairman for the Historic District Commission, calling our special meeting to order at 5:30 on March 21st. What to sit in, sit, John for, just sit John.
Just said, yeah.
Okay. For new business,
Oh, new business presentation.
Ship a meeting.
They ready?
she's trying to,
Yeah,
they're trying
so
to,
I'm in the meeting. She's sharing her screen.
Oh, nice.
I'll be
Oh,
here.
Yeah, maybe.
I gotta put you in as a participant, I gotta move you over to a panelist.
Sue Sutherland's here.
And Jim.
Pritchard too.
Now you should have the ability to share screen.
I can introduce us while we're waiting. So I am Stacy Barrow. I'm with Preservation Connecticut, which is a statutory nonprofit partner with the state's Historic Preservation Office, which Mary Dunn is with. And together we work on historic preservation issues throughout the state, and we give regular training sessions to missions throughout the state. Usually we get requests to come, or we do regional training sessions, but so we're here to sort of run through the basics. Mary's going to give you a presentation that is the most commonly given one, just to give a refresher. Okay. And then after that, you guys can ask any questions you'd like and go from there.
So good evening, everybody. Thanks for asking us to come down. As Stacy said, I'm Mary Dunn with the State Historic Preservation Office. And the town of Groton is a certified local government. And so part of my job is just to go around to all of our CLGs, there's about 54 of them in the state, and just provide, refresher training. I'm sure most of you are going to be well familiar with what I'm going to present. But I'm hoping that it'll just provide a springboard for any specific questions you might be, grappling with. As most commissions across the state do. Now I'm trying to get rid of that.
This is our chair, who's gonna be. All right, so.
All right. So just to start with, you know that you derive your authority from Connecticut enabling statute, specifically section 7147. This is the statute on which or pursuant to which your local ordinance is created. So if you ever have questions about, what your purview is, or if there's a specific issue, refer to the statutes or call my office or Stacy and we'll refer to the statutes, or check with your town attorney and he or she will refer to the statutes. But as you know, you were basically set up through a local ordinance to promote and educate the residents about the architectural and historical and cultural significance of the district or districts that you have purview over. This enabling legislation was created in the early 1960s, and then after that, many towns took advantage of it. So as you know, I'm just going to talk a little bit about how things work, which, as I said, you probably already know, but feel free to either ask questions. Now, I'm also going to kind of do a parallel certified local government thing, because as I said, you are a CLG, and CLG commissions have just slightly different parameters than a normal or regular historic district commission. So 5 regular members, of course, 3 alternate members, and all alternate members really need to be attending all meetings, just as if they are regular meetings, regular members, just because, well, you never know when you might have to be seated. But you also just want to be up to date on everything the commission has been doing. You don't want to be not going to a meeting for 6 months and then all of a sudden you're seated and you don't know what's going on, what issue is being discussed. So you should attend all meetings regularly. And then, of course, once you are seated at a meeting, you have all of the powers and duties of a regular member. The statutes strongly recommend that you have at least one member or one resident of the district that you have purview over sitting on the commission. And obviously, as with everything, this is, to the extent possible. You may not have people in the district that want to or have the time to volunteer. But if you can, it's good to have at least one person. Now, a certified local government commission, and I'll talk about what a CLG is in a little bit. One way it's different is that theoretically, an historic district commission, that's usually appointed by the chief elected official, doesn't have to necessarily know anything or have an interest in historic preservation, even though that's their charge. But a certified local government commission ideally would have at least 2 professionally qualified people in the field of historic preservation, architecture, architectural history, archaeology, something like that. Again, this isn't always possible because you may not have the expertise in the community, or that expertise just may not have the time to serve. But at the very least, all commission members should demonstrate an interest and support of historic preservation. So that, because you're part of a preservation partnership with our office and the National Park Service, it's just a must that you at least have an interest in historic preservation. And then just the general, 1 or more expiring terms per year. And the officers that you should have are a chair, a vice chair, and a clerk. Your primary responsibilities are like any other commission: establish rules of procedure, include your conflict of interest policy. You do, as a commission set up under 7147, you do submit an annual report to our office each year on just your membership and activities. If commission members have changed, we like to see the resumes of the new commission members. If you've enacted new ordinances that support historic preservation, we like to see that. We don't want to see the minutes of all your meetings, but we kind of like a general idea of how many certificates of appropriateness applications you've seen, how many you've approved, how many you've rejected or denied, things like that. And then I also send a questionnaire that CLGs have to fill out so that I can report federally on a yearly basis. And John Bird, I don't know if he's here, but he's familiar with it. I need to send him the report format, but he's familiar with that requirement. And then last, and probably the meat of what you do, is to adopt regulations to provide guidance to property owners as to factors to be considered in preparing an application for a certificate of appropriateness. Now, I apologize, but I did not have a chance to check. Do you have published design review guidelines so that your property owners in the districts know how you conduct your business and how you make your reviews? Great. Okay. We do recommend that you use the Secretary of Interior standards as a basis. It's not, obviously, there's nothing in the statute that requires that, but as a CLG, we like to mirror what the SHPO and what the National Park Service use. Sometimes it's good to understand what the character defining features of a particular district are, so that you know what's appropriate and what may not be appropriate. If you plan to update your design review guidelines, it's really good to get buy-in from the property owners, get input from them so they feel that they've been a part of the process. They don't feel like, that their interests or needs are being overlooked. And then I don't know how many applications you get. You might get a ton. So you might consider just setting up blanket approvals, which I can talk about in just a minute. So I mentioned that, oh, yes. Yeah.
What do you mean by blanket approval?
Yeah, I think I have a slide for those. Yeah. I'll go to this slide and then I'll.
I have a question for you too. Are you able to print this out so we can have a copy of it?
Yes, I wasn't in the office today. Otherwise I would have brought handouts. I'm sorry, but I will definitely, I'll send somebody this, the chair or the vice chair. I'll send somebody this, but I can also print things out too. So if you like. So blanket approvals are formally adopted by the commission. And they basically are items that don't require a COA. And this is basically to streamline the process, because if you have a property owner coming to you with, that wants to put a birdhouse in their backyard and they think they have to come to you, having these blanket approvals set up and published lets them know, oh, you don't need to see that. And so that you don't get inundated with, applications that aren't necessary. As I said, list them in your design guidelines. And they just address small issues and non-permanent changes like a mailbox or, a porch light or a bird feeder, things that are not permanent, that don't affect the exterior architecture features of the property. And it can only be items that don't require a building permit, most of which these don't, because you cannot do a COA or anything that requires a building permit needs a COA first. So you can't just do a blanket.
So it says non-permanent changes.
Yes.
What about a permanent change? Like solar panel?
You should definitely review solar panels.
Talk about
Yeah.
building permit.
Is a mailbox non-permanent?
It's less permanent than solar panels, yes, because a mailbox is easy to take off by the person. Yes, solar panels are generally leased or rented, but they're generally there. When we say permanent, we mean I am not, the ease of reversibility. Solar panels generally are on the building for at least 20 years, 10 to 20 years. So that does constitute a permanent change. And the statute does address, I think I'm going to talk about that in just a little bit. Playscapes are non-permanent and they're usually in a backyard anyway, hopefully. So,
Buildings under 200 square foot, accessory structures don't require a building permit.
okay.
Yeah.
Can I just ask one question on that too? Relating to the solar panels, I was under the impression that we couldn't not approve solar panels. So why isn't that something that could go through as a blanket approval?
Right.
That's
going.
for some reason, that's everybody's impression. And I think it's because the statutes, and I hate to be giving everybody.
Can we not, it's not that we can't approve, but we can approve location, correct?
Right.
You can also disapprove if it affects the overall quality of the historic district.
Yeah, the statutes, and I don't have the statutes in front of me. Because people never read the second part of the sentence. It says no application for solar panels will be rejected unless their installation is deemed to have an adverse or whatever, an incongruent impact. So you don't automatically have to accept them. You need to work with the property owner to make sure that the installation is appropriate for the district. And there's many ways to do that. And we can kind of provide resources for you that show how you can have solar panels in an historic district that are what the property owner wants, but also don't have an adverse impact on the architectural character of the district. So, and I'll be happy to send you information on that if you I mentioned the Secretary of Interior standards for the rehabilitation of historic property. There's 4 preservation standards, but we use rehab because they're the most flexible. They're usually for buildings that are in active use, like homes or businesses. And it's not do's and don'ts. It's basically a list of 10 or so best practices and recommendations. And they were instituted when the late 60s, 70s. They've been around for at least 50 years. Late 60s. So they've been really tested. They've even been tested in the courts. So it's really generally accepted that if you use the standards, you're making objective, non-capricious decisions. And mainly, these are the highlights. Try to maintain as much historic or architectural character as possible. Retain as much as possible, especially distinctive features and finishes, like original porch columns, things like that. Try to repair rather than replace materials. And if you have to replace materials, try to replace them in kind. So wood for wood, brick for brick, things like that. Some commissions have grappled with a property that say it was built in 1850, and then in 1910 it got a front porch. That front porch is considered important because it's an acquired change to the property that's more than 50 years old, so it's achieved its own significance. So it's something that you would need to review and take into consideration. You don't want changes that create a false sense of historical or architectural development. especially with infill. Yep,
Yeah, can you define that phrase?
which one?
False sense of historical.
Yep. This is, historical is probably the wrong word, architectural inspired, and especially with, so if somebody puts on a front porch that was never there. And, you know, or with infill, if somebody designs a replica of whatever they tore down, we don't recommend that. Especially in a local district, because it's your job to educate and preserve the actual historic features and not, you know, fool people into
Right.
thinking that, you know, that something has been there for over 100 years that is not. And then new construction, which you may or may not come across, especially additions, want to make sure that they don't destroy any historic materials associated with the original structure. Try to differentiate the old from the new. You know, you don't have to make an addition look exactly like the original building block. And, you know, obviously needs to be compatible in scale and other and materials especially. So those are just the highlights. Actually, I think those are them. That was yeah, sorry. We talked a little bit about blanket approval. And I think I can send examples of other commissions that have set up blanket approvals. So as you know, I know you know all this, you need a COA for a building permit or certain alterations. And then your considerations, as I said, historical and architectural value of the property that's being affected, especially in new construction. You want the new construction to be similar in size and scale. It doesn't have to look exactly like this new shoe, doesn't look like the old shoes, but it's huge. You know, it's a little out of scale and the materials are a little off. So, so when you're considering new construction, kind of consider that, you know, the relationship of new construction to the existing buildings. You need a COA before you can get a demolition permit. You need a COA for new parking and expanded parking. And this is whether, you know, regardless of the use. So if somebody wants to convert their house to a business, you know, you don't get to say, no, you can't do that. But if they need to make a change to the house or a change to the parking, you do have purview over any changes that are necessitated by that change of use. And then, you know, about the procedures, public hearing notice, you know, 5 to 15 days ahead of time. You should have a majority of members present to vote because applications, you know, are approved or denied by majority vote. You need to take action within 65 days of filing. So hopefully when somebody submits the application to town hall, it gets date stamped. And that's when the time clock starts. It doesn't start from the date of your next meeting. It starts from the date the person files. So very often you have like one meeting to decide, maybe two if you're lucky. But you need to take action within 65 days. If it's been 65 days and you're still kind of working things out with the applicant, you can't table it. You can deny the application without prejudice and just have them come back and with the application at the next meeting. And this is because the statutes, if you do not take any sort of action within 65 days, that's an automatic approval of the application. So
Is that true even if the applicant doesn't show up for their hearings?
well, if the applicant doesn't show up for the hearings and you don't have the information you need, then you can just deny it. I mean, you could deny it without prejudice until such time as the applicant comes back with the information you need. I mean, that's, yeah, you have to have all the information that you need in order to make a decision. And then, you know, you might issue or approve a COA with stipulation. And this may be where the solar panels come in. So you say, yes, sure, great, put the solar panels on, but when your lease is up, we need you to take them off the house, you know, so that the house goes back to its original architectural character. Things that are exempt from review, paint color. You don't get to tell people what color to paint their house. State properties are exempt because you can't use a state statute against the state. Ordinary exterior maintenance or repair that don't require a change in appearance, design, or material. So somebody can replace their roof as long as they're just replacing their roof. If they have asphalt shingles on their roof and they need to replace it, they can replace it with asphalt shingles without coming to you for a COA. However, you need to be careful because if they change the pitch of the roof, that's a change in appearance, and that can be very significant. You know, if you go from a flat roof to a pitched roof, that's a whole new ballgame. So this is sort of where educating the property owners comes in, just, you know, so that really everybody understands exactly what maintenance and repair really is, and that there is absolutely no change in appearance, design, or material.
How does that work with requiring a building permit? Has to go to HTC for a COA. You gotta get a building permit for it.
Well, then it falls under that. Yeah, if you need a COA before you get a building permit. And if a roof replacement requires a COA, I mean, a building permit, which I guess it does.
Hmm.
And that's good. I mean, then you can kind of.
And still come back to them.
If there's a public safety violation that, you know, that the building inspector has said, or the zoning official, they don't need to come to you for a COA. They need to do whatever they're told. You know, permits, this doesn't apply, but if you had a study report under consideration for a new district, if somebody got a permit the day before it was voted in, they don't have to come to you for a COA. It's grandfathered in. And then any property owned by a nonprofit institute of higher education. That was written into the statute, does not have to get a COA.
I'm just curious, as a former teacher, where does higher education start? 9th grade or?
No,
College.
like a university.
Oh,
How about municipal buildings?
They are subject. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, they are subject. There's nothing in the statute that exempts municipal buildings. If there's something in your charter, or if your town attorney says that you can't hold the municipality to a municipal ordinance, I don't know. Although I mean, could the
Some
town like,
ordinances do write their own buildings out.
Yeah.
They have done that. I think
Yeah.
New Milford did that, which, you know, so
we would prefer they did.
we would prefer they did.
But I mean, like, say the town wanted to build on wetlands. Could they do that? Would they have to follow the wetlands ordinance or not? Then they should follow your ordinance. I mean, you're just as important as any other planning and zoning. If they have to do any sort of planning and zoning or any other sort of, then they really should come to you. I mean, especially if you're a certified local government, you kind of want to retain, you know, your architectural character. So they should want to get the benefit of your, you know, expertise and your consultation. If you see a violation, you need to work through your zoning enforcement officer or whoever else is appointed as the zoning enforcement entity. You can't just kind of like walk down the street and assault your neighbor and say, hey, stop that. You need to go through channels. If you deny a COA application, the property owner has 15 days to appeal in the Superior Court. Also, you have the right, if somebody is violating a COA, if the zoning enforcement officer cannot get a cease and desist or a cease and correct, or if you actually have the right to go to Superior Court to correct the action. That rarely happens, and rarely do people actually impose fines. But you also do have that option too. If someone's in violation of a COA and they're not working to correct it and they're like ignoring you, you do have the opportunity. You do have the option of that.
That would have to be in the ordinance.
What's that?
That would have to be in the ordinance, or does it follow statutory guideline
If you
for the actual amount?
Yeah. The actual amount is by statute.
Okay.
If your town attorney says that you can increase or decrease that, you can certainly do that. Because remember, these statutes were written, I mean, they're updated, but I think this was written like, 60 years ago. So, I mean, it's $10 a day. isn't that bad.
Exactly.
And the variation is that the first range is if they unknowingly did something. And then the second is if they willfully, like you issued them a denial and they just went ahead and did the work anyway. That's a little more egregious than, not knowing.
It's like statutory language states that you can offer a refund policy for a building permit, but you have to put in an ordinance, and so you have to go through the town to get it approved in an ordinance form.
If
So is
that's,
that the same way you would have to follow that for the fine?
if your ordinance is set up pursuant to the state statute, then it's already covered. Is that, you have that right?
Okay.
I don't think you have to write it into the ordinance.
I just don't want to pick an arbitrary number, fine,
Yeah.
on the high end or low end.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that is, you know, I mean, the only differentiation they make is why is one range 10 to 100 and the other is 100 and 250, and it's the
Right.
difference between, you know, innocence and egregious. But you know, yeah, it might be a good idea not to just arbitrarily say, okay, you have to pay 90 a day,
Right,
you know,
right,
because we don't
right.
like it, you know, just, yeah, it's probably a good idea to solidify that, codify that. And as I said, the property owner can appeal within 15 days of the decision.
How about non-property owners, like budding property
There's
owners?
nothing that provides for abutting property owners to appeal. And I don't know that, have you ever heard of anybody going to court? No, for grieving it, yeah.
I've never heard of anyone going to court, period. in the
Yeah,
town
well,
I've
that's
been
true.
working.
Yeah,
For anything?
For anything, no. I have seen fines imposed, that's super rare. But never an appeal that's been brought to a superior court. Ever.
yeah, no.
Is that, do you think for just sheer practical cost considerations?
Yeah, I do, it could be. I think people just work it out, you know, between, and they live in the same communities, right?
Yeah,
So much generally, people just talk it out between folks.
I mean, the public hearing, I mean, if the abutting property owners have an issue, they should have the right to speak at the public hearing, you know, if you know, to talk to you and explain their concerns. But I think that's the only standing they actually have. Now, here's a little known fact. If you approve a certificate of appropriateness for a demolition, you all agree, okay? There is an automatic 90-day delay that's written in state statute. And you need to notify our office and give us the opportunity to try to find an alternative to the demolition. And, you know, depending on the situation and whether we have the capacity to do that, you know, we usually, when we get a notification and there's nothing that we can do, we usually just turn right around and say, you know, I'm sorry, we're, you know, we don't have the capacity to find a purchaser or, you know, retain or remove the building. But the 90 days, even if you've approved the demolitions, you know, it is an opportunity to further the conversation if you want to. You might offer an abatement of property taxes to the property owners since they have to wait that 90 days before they can demolish the building. But there's no obligation for any of that.
And we, as an advocacy organization, Preservation Connecticut, we can step in and advertise the building for free if someone wants to move it off the site or something like that, just so it stays out of the landfill. That's the best option, but you know, people have taken advantage of that in the past.
Yeah, that's true. Now, a while back, our office issued some policies regarding certain issues that kept coming up to us. This is not law, but they were actually reviewed by the Attorney General. And it's just, this is our policy on how we interpret. And actually, this first one is probably just a basic zoning practice as well. And that's that the boundaries of the district need to be contiguous and continuous. You can't have like one property in the middle of the district that's not covered by your purview, because most zoning, that's spot zoning, and most, you know, and most zoning people will tell you that's not really optimal. So boundaries need to be, you know, they can look really funky, they can look, you know, really sawtoothy, but they have to be continuous. And all the properties need to be contiguous. Solution of historic districts. There's nothing in the statutes that provide for how to dissolve a district. We don't have the authority to create that process. However, and it did happen, well, it didn't happen, but the town of Berlin, one property owner wanted to dissolve the whole district. And so they addressed it the same way they addressed creating the district. They balloted all of the property owners to see if they wanted to dissolve the district, and they did not want to, so the district stood. But that is the only instance, and that was like 15 years ago. That's the only instance. But if this is coming up, you need to talk to your town attorney and figure out how your ordinance would be amended or not amended if this were something that you wanted to do, which I hope you wouldn't, but anyway, yeah.
Can you go back a slide? I just thought of a question. And maybe I'm the only one who doesn't know the answers. If there was a property that was on the border
Mhm.
of the historic district, and we can vote that property out of the,
It was half in and half
half,
out.
it was half in, half out.
Are you talking about now?
Yeah. So
Um,
how would we,
That would have to go through planning and zone, okay. It would have to go through your town attorney or planning and zoning, because it's part of the verbal boundary is part of an ordinance.
Okay.
So you can't vote, I don't think you can vote to change an ordinance. The ordinance has to be changed by your local legislative body. So if there's a property that's on the edge.
Yeah.
You would go to, I would start with your town attorney, because he or she would really know this, but it would have to be voted on just the way the ordinance was voted in by your local legislative body. And so you would, present something.
So
an
we-
amendment.
so we
Just
could
to-
present it to the
Just to-
town council? Oh,
Well,
sorry.
just to
Go ahead.
clarify, Bill, it wasn't that it was on the edge. It apparently was part of a subdivision a while ago, so the line literally passed through 50% of the property of this
Oh, okay.
property. So
Okay.
it wasn't that
My
we were
bad.
trying to like add it or remove it. It's just that it was I think it was the only property in the historic district where the line didn't follow the property line. So I
Okay.
think, and Peter, you might be able to jump in. I thought there was something in the ordinance that said we had the right to deal with weird situations like that, which that was the only one.
So I remember there was something in there that we followed the
Okay.
process on that.
All right, that's my
Yeah.
bad memory. That's,
You definitely, if you want to create new districts, you generally don't need to go through the whole, I mean, you need to do a study report and all of that, but you generally don't need, especially if it's in the ordinance, you generally don't need the chief elected official to appoint you to do that. You can at your discretion create new districts. But yeah, I mean, everything I say is barring, I mean, as long as it's not prohibited by statute, and if there's something in your local legislation that allows for something, then, every town is different. It's 169 of you, so it's hard to, keep up with everybody. A dissolution, and then non-contributing versus contributing properties. Because this is basically a zoning thing, once the boundaries are set, everything in the district comes under your purview, whether it was built in 2016 or, 1916. So there's no contributing or non-contributing. We do have contributing and non-contributing properties in national and state register districts, but not with local districts, because there's a verbal boundary and everything within that boundary falls under the ordinance.
So what's your feeling or interpretation of, if you've got a house that was, well, let's take something that's not over 50 years old, that existed prior to the creation of the historic district, which if one were to look at it in an objective manner would say this isn't contributing to anything, like a classic ranch burger type house or something.
Right.
So what would be your feeling about someone's ability to alter that house significantly?
It would have to come to you, and
It
that's.
would have to come to us, right? But
Point.
wouldn't you think you have a little bit more leeway?
Oh, well, yes, well, because,
Or just to go further, or demolish it altogether.
well, and that is important, and that's why these buildings all fall into the ordinance, because if you're going to demolish something, you're probably going to build something in its place. And so you as a commission need to review the plans that for the new building and make sure that they're compatible with the rest of the district. But I would say even if the building is going to stay standing and they want to put 2 more stories on it, they need to come to you.
Right.
So.
But let me do the counterbalance to that. So I can think of a house in Mystic that was built in 1750, and the house across here was American Gothic. So if you want to look at it in the 1890s, that would be like us building a modern house across from a historic house today. So kind of in the overall
let's say, long look, does that ranch house contribute? Because it's part of the history of the district, was built in the 50s. I know to us today, it seems more modern,
Well, I mean,
but at what point is that cutoff, right?
right, well, there is no period of significance, it's in local districts. And there are districts that are coming, that are under consideration, that consist of 1950 split levels and ranches.
Yeah, ranches.
But even in that context, all the buildings were built in the 1950s for a purpose, and so that's the architectural significance.
And they haven't been changed from
Right.
their original design. So the original ranch design would be intact, right? So if people have made changes since the 50s to the building and now it looks different and it looks like a 1990s ranch, version, then I don't think it would have the same level of significance as it would if it were a pristine 1950s ranch that sort of looks almost mid-century modern in a way, So there's all of those considerations, and that's why case by case,
It is case by case, and that's why they're not exempt from your review. It doesn't mean that you're like, you need to put wood shakes on the roof and,
Yeah.
you don't go that far, but they just need to let you know what they're doing so that you can determine.
Right, but in other words, that's where it's always been a question in my mind about. I mean, I look, sometimes, I tend to impose sort of issues of aesthetics or whatever, and if you look at something, just because it was built in the 50s doesn't mean it was good looking when it was built or any better looking 50 years later.
Yeah.
And so that, and I understand the whole issue about, that you don't build something new or add an addition onto something and make it look like it's always been there. I mean, I've done Park Service, certified rehabs, and they always were very adamant about that. If you're going to add a stair tower because you need it, make sure you can look at that stair tower and see that it obviously was not original to the structure. But you also run into this whole issue about, there is no period of time in the district that is the appropriate period of time or the appropriate architectural scheme. And that, through all of history, and this has been talked about before, someone will come back from a trip around the world in the 1800s and have seen some houses in Europe and then decide to take their Dutch colonial and turn it into an Italianate. And of course, they were permitted to do that. Well, no one was watching. And unfortunately, people's taste in those years was actually much better than today, which is something that's very frustrating.
You don't make your decisions based on taste.
Right.
Or aesthetics.
Yeah.
But you do, but you do just make it on the overall impact of the architectural character of the district and your charge to preserve the historic and architectural significance of the actual source as well.
Right, but when you talk about congruity, and you can drive through Mystic now and everyone, you see some houses that are plopped in amongst these much older structures that stick out like a sore thumb.
And that's
It's just too bad.
Yeah, and they're not in a local district. So just quickly, I'm just gonna go over what it means to be a local government. The CLG program is just a partnership between the National Park Service, our office, and the municipality. And it was set up by the Park Service in the 1980s to allow the local governments more of a say in their local historical preservation program, and also to help them sort of participate in the national program. So it builds a strong partnership between our office and the Park Service and the municipality, by which we provide technical assistance and financial assistance. And there are 54, I think, CLGs, and Groton's been a CLG since 1990. And the benefits are, education and training. There's a National Alliance of Preservation Commissions. I don't know if you're familiar with NAPC, but it's really a great organization. They have not a newsletter, but a bulletin, a website, and they do a conference every 2 years. It's probably one of the best conferences I've been to because it's a great way to network with other commissions across the country. The Park Service has a role in it, and so there's lots of training and critical issues. discussions. And so one of the benefits of being a CLG is that we can help subsidize, we can help pay for your membership in NAPSI, and we can help pay for certain special webinars that they have. And we can even help subsidize travel to the conference they have every other year. Hopefully, because this was all set up by the property owners, the chief elected official, and voted in by the local legislative body, hopefully after all that, you know, you've got a stronger preservation influence in the community, hopefully. We look to our CLGs. We're about to write our next 5-year statewide historic preservation plan. So part of that is meeting with our certified local governments to see what specific issues they're grappling with, and how we can put goals and objectives in place to kind of help you meet some of the issues that you're working with. You do have a formal role in the National Register process. Anybody can write a National Register nomination. And once it's submitted to our office for consideration, our National Register Coordinator, and Stacy was our National Register Coordinator, so she can stop me if I'm wrong. But she would send that nomination to you, the commission, as well as your chief elected officials, for you to review the nomination and concur that the resource or the district meets the criteria of National Register listing. This isn't local, this is for the National Register. If both of you don't concur and say this doesn't meet the criteria, then that stops the process. That property would not be listed on the National Register. If one of you concurs and the other doesn't, then it moves forward. So that's important. So if you get a National Register nomination from our National Register Coordinator, please take the time to read it and weigh in, so that we have the benefit of your knowledge. And then of course you're eligible for grant. As a municipality, you're already eligible for grants, but as a CLG, we can offer you non-matching federal grants for a variety of historic preservation, education and awareness activities. And then we also have state funding that does require a match, but that's for larger projects. If you have a town-owned vacant building and you don't know what to do with it, we can give you funds to coordinate, a charrette to convene stakeholders and get ideas about what to do with the building and how to move forward. We can fund architectural plans and specifications. And yeah.
Would you have money if we wanted to revise our guidelines to have?
Betcha. Yes, we would. Yeah, we just gave money to Norwich, Westport, a couple, Enfield. Yes, yes.
Do you guys also have money? There's been some talk by downtown merchants to have like a historic district street sign put up. I know New London has something similar. Is that money you guys have, or?
We don't do signage.
There is an organization that,
The Pomeroy.
yep, the
Yeah.
Pomeroy organization that will give money for really nice metal signs for historic districts. We can get you that.
Yeah,
information.
yeah.
And can you get us a list of all the different grants available?
Oh, yeah, yes,
Right.
yeah. Yeah, and maybe Stacy might want to just, sorry, okay, never mind.
And is that, there also are funds that, I mean. Fairly major. Renovation, rehabilitation, and we got money from the state under a grant program. That a separate fund?
Yeah.
It was an annually you could apply, and then
Historic
it
restoration.
was matching,
Yeah, that's the historic restoration.
right?
Yeah, for capital projects.
That's our bricks and mortar, and you're eligible for that anyway. The CLG grants are more for planning and pre-development, so like conditions assessments, architectural plans and specs. If you want to do a series of like educational kiosks that teach people about the architectural history, we would fund something like that. We did that in Norwich as well. So
There's walking tour,
Yeah.
anything, QR codes.
yeah.
So I have another question on some of these buildings. So I also sit on the property reuse committee, which is to come up with RFPs for like some of our school buildings. So if someone were deemed historic, is that something we could apply for a grant for to figure out how to use it?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. So I think so the enhancement grant is non-matching federal funds. It's up to $20,000. And as I said, any manner of public education and awareness, outreach, visioning, preservation toolkits. If you want to update your website to just help properties owners, navigate the whole process. Just a variety, anything you want to come up with. Then the supplemental is the state money funded by the Community Investment Act. That's up to $30,000. It's for larger things like architectural plans and specifications, support an historic restoration fund grant application. But if you want to do a survey, and it's like a townwide historic resources inventory, we can give you 30,000 without a match to hire someone to add buildings, not to your local district. We could fund that as well, but a survey is more just like an information gathering tool that just goes out in the town and just identifies properties that may be historically significant. And if you already have them, which I'm pretty sure you do, you can always apply to get them updated. We're almost done. So yeah, wide range of planning and pre-development, you know, all that I talked about, and I'll make this available to you. I just wanted to touch briefly on questions that we often get. The whole idea of what is a public way. Generally, that's the street, not somebody's driveway. It could be a river that goes by a local historic district. I don't know. Do you have any?
I have a question on that.
Yeah.
So if you have a property that has, say, restaurants in it,
Mhm.
which the public is invited, if they walk into the interior of the property, is the interior of the property considered a public way, or is that considered a public way?
The interior?
Well,
I
it
guess.
happens to be a piece of property that I own.
Okay.
Okay. It's called Factory Square because it's basically a series of
Oh.
buildings that surround an interior courtyard, so that the issue came up because it was brought to the commission for approval, even though that was pointed out by one commission member, well, you can't see this addition from a public way.
Oh,
But in my prior years of appearing before the HDC, which goes over 25 to 30 years, that the prior commission had always interpreted that to be a public way because the public, you could be on your way to the restaurant and you could be in the courtyard. I mean, is that issue is,
well, that's come up. I mean, I haven't heard of something like that. I mean, that's not unusual. But if you are in the parking lot of, say, a strip mall, and that's public, and you could see the exterior change, then yeah, that's a public way. So if
An alley,
yeah,
like a.
yeah, anything that the public has access to. So
But if you're in a private building, inside the private building.
you're not in the buildings,
You're in the courtyard.
you're in the courtyard.
and what are you seeing from the courtyard? Like the.
Well, you'd see all the buildings, all the parts of the building that abut, and then in this case, an addition to the rear of one of those abutting buildings, not
Yeah.
visible from the.
Yeah,
It
that's
was, I was actually the one that made the point about it because the front of the building inside of that horseshoe faces the street. And I totally agree that that's a public way. But the rear, it's still Todd's private property. So if he wanted to throw someone out of there, he could do that. Just because someone has the right, in theory, to walk across it because they want to go to the restaurant, it's still private property. So I thought restricting what was occurring inside of private property just didn't seem right. And that's why I was trying to say it's not a public way. There's not many properties, if any other ones like that. So it may be a non-issue, but it was something that we were curious about.
So, I mean, yeah, if you want to follow the letter of the law, maybe it's visible from a public way, but then you also need to just review how that change, if you're walking down the street, how that impacts the congruity of the district itself. So if it's visible from a public way, but people don't really use that public way.
Or-
Except for to go to the, yeah.
Well, it's a question of, the real question is it or is it not a public way when you walk into this interior space? I mean, we took it got taken through the HCC approval process just because it wasn't entirely clear, but it had come up in the past
Yeah.
with regard to the same location.
That isn't entirely clear. I don't know the answer.
Okay, that's probably the right answer.
I can't give you a good answer.
Okay, well, shades of gray here.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, frankly, is it really a public, I mean, like the person that just,
Eric,
yeah, like Eric said, it's still your property. It's your private property. I mean, like, yeah.
So it means if
again,
it was
I'm
to
not a
public way.
lawyer. I'm not a lawyer, but if the issue is passed and everything worked out well, then okay, let it lie. Yeah, but that's a good question. But if you're grappling with something like that, again, because each town has a different charter and different, you need to go to planning and zoning or your town attorney just for a legal interpretation if you need one.
Thank you.
Obviously, you don't have jurisdiction over the use of a property, but again, if that use necessitates an incongruous change to the exterior, then you have purview. We talked a little bit about solar panels, and some of the information we can send you. Park Service has a whole section in their sustainability guidelines on reviewing solar panels. We get a lot of questions about reviewing synthetic and substitute materials, and I know we have like 10 minutes left. So if you want, Stacy and I have training on all of these issues already been for.
Archaeological considerations, can you expand upon what that means?
Yes, if the site has been designated under the local ordinance as an archaeological preserve or an archaeological site, then you have control over what happens. Like say it's a vacant spot, and somebody wants to build on it, you have the right to consult with our staff archaeologist or the state archaeologist to make sure that ground disturbance isn't going to have an adverse impact on that site. But it has to be an archaeological site that's actually within the boundaries of the.
What if it hasn't been determined to be an archaeological site yet, but there's significant historical, I don't know, source material that says something occurred there and we're concerned about it? Do we have any purview in saying, hey, we want you to hold off till we can investigate it, or?
I mean, under the.
I think just
ordinance, I'm not
be-
sure, but
I was gonna say, I think just be specific about it. So the property, they're currently building a house. We approved the house, but it was a fort, I think in the War of 1812.
Yeah,
And
there was actually a cannon fired off of it that killed a couple British Marines.
wow.
And we, at the time, we raised some issues, but it just got poo-pooed.
Well, it's on the top of a big rock, so I don't know what kind of excavation you'd be able to do.
They're actually blasting that rock now or splitting it apart, so.
I don't know the answer to that, but I would always encourage you to reach out to the state,
Yeah.
Kathy Labadia at the State Historic
Yep.
Preservation Office. She has actual maps that aren't publicly available showing areas of archaeological sensitivity that have been defined.
Okay.
So that might be able to help you make your determination. So I
Yeah.
mean, just would be worth asking.
And if you have, I'm sorry, yeah, and if you have other areas in your district that look like they might have potential or archaeological resources, we can fund surveys of those areas.
So we could contact Kathy if they're on the map, and if they are, request that you fund the surveys to add them to protect them.
Yes.
Okay.
Just if you have any thought, we have a number of restaurants that are in our historic district. And after COVID, there's been an impetus for restaurant owners to put rooftop outdoor dining. I'm wondering if you had any thoughts, pro or con, about that issue.
I mean, if they're not building anything, if the exterior changes to putting tables and chairs and umbrellas, then it's probably.
No, it's on the roof where they do have to build.
And they're
some-
building something on the roof? Oh,
Yeah.
you totally have purview over that.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if you had any thoughts about that.
Just think of material and scale, I mean, from an economic standpoint, yay,
Right.
but you definitely, again, there you go again, I'm sure zoning says, yes, you are allowed to do that. But you have to review how that new use affects the property. So if they're actually building on top of it, then yes, you totally, and just think about the scale, the setback, maybe,
Minimizing visibility from the
Exactly,
street, I
exactly.
guess, is really it. And making sure that it doesn't impact the actual architectural character of the roof, right? So you don't want
Right.
to take a gabled roof and make it
Flat.
That would be ridiculous, but yeah, and make it flat, but things like that. But balancing economic development and progress with the historic fabric is kind of what you're all about. So it's not a hard yes or no.
But how do we achieve that in the best way possible?
It's kind of like the same way we would give you advice on solar panels. So if you're going to approve solar panels, you want to put it on the rear of the building, right, if possible. And if you can't do that, you sort of place it in a way that's least visible. So that's how we would advise you to to guide these property owners too, like Mary said, setting it back a little bit, maybe 3 feet from the facade, or, you know, just any way that you can sort of minimize that impact from the streetscape.
Considering, you know, back patio dining, if that's possible, rather than rooftop, you know, just minimizing if possible.
So I have like 3 specific questions. Can we get through before we run out of time?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Are you
We're done.
supposed to leave at 6:30 or can we go over?
Our meeting is not until 7.
Oh, never mind. We got plenty of time then.
Okay.
All right,
We-
I was thinking 6:30 for some reason.
Yeah.
Well, now I got about 18, but.
No, I didn't know if you were out the door at 6:30 or we had the small window of questions, but if you can stay past 6:30, that'd be great. Okay, go.
So, let's say we have a situation where somebody came in, they got a COA for 6 items they wanted to do to their business. We approved it. And then construction was done and there was, let's say, 12 items that were done unapproved. And these are just arbitrary numbers. And that came up and then they came back and they got 6 items approved, but never brought up the other 12. And then we said, hey, we want another work stop order issued. We want them to go over it. We were then told, well, they submitted a photograph and you guys didn't pick up the photograph. Is that true? Or can we still request that that be
If they're doing work that was not approved by a COA, they have to come in. And it has to be outlined in the application. Just because there happens to be something else that,
okay,
They have to present it to you, because if you have questions,
yeah.
you know.
okay.
you need
I
to-
just, I want to just jump in for 1 second, just so we're 100% on the same page, because this was a pretty hotly debated item. So just because they submit photos doesn't mean that everything in the photos is approved if we didn't recognize or they didn't present what was done in those photos.
Yeah.
Because
No.
Okay.
the issue is that we had architects coming in and just saying, well, here's everything that was done. And in like 5 minutes, we're supposed to pick it up based on some photos, and that's really difficult.
No.
That's almost impossible, I would think. I mean,
Yeah.
How do you know that the photos show everything? It's impossible for you to know, right? I mean, we suggest you have site visits and site walks and all of these things, if it's a really complicated project, so.
And a photo is rarely, I mean, what would the photo be? I mean, it's proposed work. What is the photo?
No. This was work that was done without a COA.
Took
so
pictures of it
came back
afterwards,
in.
brought it in, got the approval.
Right, so I'll get a little more
So that's okay. COA was approved, a number of extra work was done on the back of the building, on the side of the
Oh.
building. It came to the attention of the town, a stop work order was issued. The architect came in and did kind of a 5-minute, well, I just got back from here and I think, and maybe, and then come to find out later, there was, and I don't remember the exact, because they brought up 4 items, but there was 12 that were actually done.
No, they have to present everything that requires the COA, and a passive, that's not your job to figure out. Yeah, they need to present all of the work,
Okay.
not just by implication or inference or whatever.
Do we have the authority to reverse a certificate of approval that we've already issued?
I don't think so. I mean, if you approve work and they do the work exactly as they said they would, then
What if they haven't done it yet?
better ask your town attorney.
That's a town attorney question. Yeah, that's a town attorney question.
Yeah.
But if they did work that you didn't approve, you have the right to technically fine them. I mean, that's a sticky
To stop, yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
But I've seen other historic district commissions fine people for doing work that was not approved.
So that kind of goes to my next question. What is our enforcement ability? Do we, if we have as a commission say, hey, we feel, John did this wrong, can we instruct the town to take enforcement action, or do we advise?
Can we just step back for 1 second? I
Sure.
want to, your question is good too, so I want to get to it, but I want to just get back to this one thing, which is, so they got a COA issued. They then came back into to correct the COA for work that wasn't approved. Some of that was delineated and most of it was not. I think John then went back to the town and said, hey, this other work wasn't done or wasn't approved. And the response from the town was, well, they submitted photos of everything and basically you guys should have picked up on it. And we said, no. And that is kind of where it died. So What you're saying to me is that's wrong.
I'm saying that's wrong. I'm not a lawyer, but yeah, that you.
Do you think it was wise of the commission to approve it that night? Notice when those pictures are submitted and actually approve it?
Well, but we
Take
have,
time to deliberate over it and look at it a little bit.
we approved what they presented. That's the point. Then I look back and,
So those pictures were submitted.
yeah, but he never said what was on there. I mean, if I take a picture of me and my family, and I
That's where
talk
a site
about
visit-
me, I
that's
mean,
where a
I
site
talk about my
visit-
cousins, right?
That's where a site visit probably would have been good. I think you guys approved that way too quick. Honestly.
I don't disagree.
Then we got the 65 days, so. gotta do-
Right, exactly. You had the time. There's no reason to.
Well, it sounds painful, but chalk it up as a next time, just, you know.
But what I'm saying is they never brought the other stuff up. So he's saying whether we approve those 6 items too quickly or not. What about the other 6 items that were never brought up? That I went to the site after the fact and said, hey, they never brought A, B, C, D, or E up.
That's
That
what I'm
should have to
asking.
come
is,
back before us.
Do they need to come back again? I mean, that's what I'm trying to just ask the question.
I mean, I think they should, because the COA is based on a specific set of work, and if that work is not delineated in the application, it isn't, I mean, because you could take a picture and it could have like, you know, somebody else's house in it just accidentally, that doesn't mean that's part of the work, that's, you know, so how are you supposed to know that?
But a lot of the applications are very, not vague, but they're very simple. They
This
say
is
add
fair.
porch or
This is-
fine.
yeah,
Yeah.
this is
put in
fair.
the stairs.
And I know that you might feel like you're being tough, but you've got to get all the information you feel you need. If you don't think you need more information, don't worry about it, but do not be, not afraid, but just don't hesitate to, if you don't see all the information you need to make a decision and you still have more time left to table it to the next meeting, do that.
I'm talking about the application itself, that, you know, it's a 1-page document.
It
You know-
needs to be supported. Like, say they want to, whatever they need to do. If you need more information about specifications of materials or design or techniques, method, you know, work scope, and you don't see it, then they need to come back. I know it sounds, you know, hard, but, or, you know, like you might be. How can you make a decision if you don't have all the information you feel you need? And then if you don't get that by the 65 days, that's when you deny without prejudice and ask them to resubmit with all the information that you need.
We work with commissions that ask for samples to be brought in of the materials and, you know, mock-ups and, you know, they ask, they really put people kind of through the ringer, you know, but they feel like that's their job and, you know,
Yeah.
Roxbury comes to mind and they do a great job, you know what I mean? And, you know, they have the authority to do that, you know, and you have the authority to do that. It's just,
I mean, yeah, I mean, just think, I mean, if someone came to planning and zoning for site plan approval, they'd have to have everything, all the information before planning and zoning could make a decision. And you have that same right to ask.
I guess the issue is like, if we, like I said, the application itself, 1 page, very simple.
Right.
Then they put in a bunch of exhibits and then we approve it. Are we approving everything that was in all the exhibits? Even if it wasn't specifically
Oh.
pointed out to us or delineated in the application or,
it
like you said, you have
appears it would be,
It
yeah.
appears
It
that
appears you would be, yeah. So maybe it's time to revise the application. We can help with that.
But I think the photograph is different because again. I take a photograph of my house and it's got a classic car and it doesn't mean the classic car, if I want to restore its part, I gotta get HCC approval for it. I mean, I'm gonna draw the difference in the photograph of. If you're saying these 6 things on the application, that's what you're getting approval on.
Right.
I mean, I'm gonna use the word that I said before. I don't think you should win on a gotcha. And that's what that sort of feels like. If you say that the photo, I don't understand the legal premise of saying that's okay, because it was never delineated in the
Well,
application.
exactly. The photo is there to illustrate what's in the application. And if there happens to be other stuff in the photo, fine, but that doesn't mean you're approving it because it's not in the application. There's an application. There's a scope that needs to accompany the application, and
If in the application was ambiguous before.
I know. I know, it's, you know. just-
I would just suggest that if you're uncomfortable with the scope of an application and you don't, if you feel it is ambiguous, to take that time to table it like, in the future, you know, it's, I know it's tough. I know. Yeah.
sometimes, and I don't know what your opinion, but sometimes during the hearing, get the applicants to kind of at real time to amend the application, by writing on it and initialing it and dating it. So that's okay. That's now part of the application.
If it's all part of, yeah, I don't see why not.
I see Peter shake his head, and I kind
No,
of agree with him.
yeah, because I don't think you can, I don't think they should be able to revise what was actually put in the public notice.
There you go.
So if they change it and altering the space of what was there for the, like, if one was a driveway and they altered it, and
Really, yeah,
I suggested that he rescind his application and come back with a new one.
But if they didn't, if they said, you know, put railing and they didn't say what it was made of, and at time of the hearing, they want to say delineate, you know, wood. That's,
Well, I think we should save that for new business because there's something else coming up that it's gonna go perfectly into that conversation about public hearings and notice and all that. So I think that might be the one to
I
deliberate on
think
later.
Don's just making a good point though, which is that I think minimal, like, things that are really not major pieces of information, things that are just like little additions to it, to the documentation so that it's correctly, you know, in the file, I think is a lot different than what Peter's saying, which is if you're going to drastically redo what the application was, at that point, it should probably be either denied or
There's clarification versus substantive
Yeah,
changes,
I
right?
think that's a perfect way of explaining
You know.
the difference. One's a clarification. I mean, the railing was in the application. It's not, we're just saying, okay, the railings would,
It is.
Right.
Specified.
as opposed to, oh, we're gonna add a railing and a patio.
Give the
You know.
public the chance.
Or you're gonna alter what was submitted for whatever space was there and you're changing the configuration, that should probably come back. Okay, so everyone has a chance to look at it again. How about fees?
Yeah, so to get into enforcement actions, what are our rights on enforcement actions?
$100 to $250 a day.
Yeah,
People.
right. Well, I mean, the statutes say that your zoning
Yeah.
enforcement officer is the way you go about trying to correct changes, or whoever's appointed by the town. Sometimes don't have COE, the CEO.
So I guess my question, what's the mechanism? So let's say the five of us agree that as projects wrong, do we take a vote and ask the enforcement officer to go out and enforce it? Or is it their decision? Is it the manager's decision, the town attorney's decision? Whose decision is it?
Well, I mean, if you notice the violation, or even if somebody brings it to your attention, I'm just saying, you don't go knock on that person's door.
Yeah.
You get the zoning enforcement officer to issue a cease and desist or a cease and correct or a whatever.
It's your decision, though.
Yeah, it's your decision, yeah. And this is where your rules of procedure are good. I mean, maybe you need to vote, maybe you don't need to vote. It's a violation of something you've already approved, so.
but is it our
I guess-
job to make the determination of if we want the zoning enforcement officer to do something, or is it the zoning enforcement officer who makes the choice?
He goes out and
Oh,
describes it, yeah.
hey, he wants, yeah, if he goes out, I mean, that's, as a zoning enforcement person, you know, he's doing his job.
No,
It's
I
just-
guess- No, I'm a
But
little
let
more
me clarify.
confused.
If we say we want him to do it, does he have the right to say, no, I won't do it?
No,
No, he's
Okay.
the agent of
Yeah.
the.
But what if he goes out and determines it is in compliance?
it is in compliance.
Mhm.
Well, is he qualified? I mean,
And between the two parties then at the town level. I mean, we don't have a say in
Right,
it. I
right.
think that's up to you guys.
How about fees though? Do other towns charge application fees?
some towns do, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's usually, I mean,
Oh, have you?
I wouldn't be exorbitant about it, you know, but if,
Yeah. I think,
especially, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I remember like $25 common for, and that was a while ago, but I mean, I think.
Just at least cover the process and everything.
Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, you could mirror, if other commissions charge, like, if, you know, if zoning charges a commission for a commission, a fee for submitting a, you know, a site plan approval or something, then,
Yeah, because it's the only commission that doesn't have a fee.
oh, well then,
Every other one does. Everyone
Oh.
else charges a fee.
Oh, yeah, just match it then,
Yeah.
match another one, and then gives you a little
But
bit
we,
of like.
we would need to put that in guidelines, or can we unilaterally just decide we're going to just.
We have to vote it in,
charge
right?
People $50 to file an application.
I think you just do it the way the other commissions decided they could do it, I don't know.
I think we would take a vote on it, public hearing, and then put it on the agenda for public hearing, and then vote on it, right? Is that correct, Peter? my understanding.
It's different ones, because some are ordinance, some are state specific telling you the process.
Ah,
I guess we'll refer that to the town attorney. He can answer that for us. Okay.
Are you done with yours?
I got two more. You go.
No, wait.
Okay.
If that's your process, then yeah.
Yeah,
That's-
statutorily tells you to do that with
Oh.
building code. Historic district.
So getting back to applications, what if the HDC doesn't hold an applicant to their own standards and votes? Does that give an aggrieved party any type of leeway, or is it is what it is? We just made a mistake.
Now what now? Wait.
So let's say an application says you got to show up with A, B, C, and D for supporting documentation, and the applicant doesn't show up.
At all?
No, they show up with the application but no supporting documentation. And then we as a commission vote either for or against that application. Does our decision stand, or so even if we mess up, the other parties are sort of stuck?
Yeah, well, a better answer. I think that's just, yeah.
What other party, you're talking about the applicant? That's
The applicant or a neighbor, either one.
But they're saying the neighbor has no rights to anything.
The neighbor should show up at the public hearing that's involving this property to express whatever concerns they have.
Their argument is, it gets published on the day that nobody gets anymore.
Right.
And, how do we know?
That is one change to the statute. I mean, nobody reads those things in the paper and they're expensive.
There's a
Put
bill right
them
now.
on the website though?
Yeah.
Yeah. So people should.
Who's gonna look at the website every?
You can only do so much.
Well, that's why we have our sign thing coming.
Exactly.
Well,
right,
John.
Two last
I
ones
think-
on it. Yep.
I just to clarify your question, though, because I think it's a good one. Well, they're all good, but this one in particular, just because the commission doesn't or goes to a vote without all the information that's in our application that says you should bring, really acts as like a waiver by the commission, it seems like. So it's our job to sit there and say, hey, you're missing X, Y, and Z, or we want more photos, or we want more maps, or we want whatever. If we don't, and we just rush to a vote, we've done the disservice. But it's not that the vote is wrong. It's that we didn't necessarily get all the information that we should have. Is that
Well
a
put. And that's what I mean. That we made the mistake is where I was going. I
Made
just
the
know if there's
mistake or-
any way
mistake
past
in-
that.
no mistake? It may not be a mistake. It just may be that we made a choice to move forward faster than we would have in other applications.
That's maybe a related thing too. Sometimes we allow applicants to supplement, like we'll approve it pending submission of material list. Is that,
That's like a COA with stipulations, I guess. Yeah. Just follow up on that.
All right, then my last question, I'll turn the floor over. So a CLG, what happens if a CLG does have people that fit that educational or that requirement and they want to be on and they're not put on? How does that affect the situation?
Well, that's outside of our, we can't make it, we can't force, whoever to do anything, but we do strongly. I'm just telling everybody, the town of Groton, you're a CLG, so I'm just strongly suggesting that if you have the expertise available, you should try to seat people on the commission that have those qualifications.
Make use of resources available
Yeah.
in the community. I mean, it's only because then you tend to run into less issues. Just in general. But we don't tell anyone what to
Yeah,
do.
we're not really allowed, or we don't have the authority to say, yeah, I mean, it's the town, or your chief elected official, or how people are appointed to commissions. But, it is important to remember that as a certified local government, you kind of, as a commission is kind of held to a more preservation standard. Well, not preservation, but
And it has that written and,
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
CLG guidelines, so.
right, the chief elected official did agree that he or she would take every measure possible to seat the commission with qualified people where possible. So, we would just like it to follow through on that commitment, but we obviously can't take legal action or even tell you what to do. But we can highly recommend.
what's the status of our guidelines? I mean, they're not regulations, they're not ordinances. Ours did, I think it just says guidelines, right?
Yeah.
It just says handbook.
And that's okay, because your ordinance kind of outlines, what your purview is, but your rules of procedure would outline, how you run your meetings, and your guidelines should be pretty robust. I mean, they should explain to the property owners how everything works, how you make your decisions. I can send you some examples or.
Are we bound by them ourselves if we want to just on a case by case?
Well, everything's case by case because each building is unique, but the reason you have guidelines is so you can avoid making arbitrary and capricious decisions or be accused of making decisions based on personal taste. That's what the guidelines are for. And that's what you should refer to when you're making your decisions. But they're not like a legal document,
But any resident should be able to read our book and have a relatively
Yeah. A
good idea how we vote.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for coming and giving us your expertise.
Well, thanks
Yeah,
for
one more.
having us.
You have another question, Bill?
Yeah, any.
Oh, Bill's got more questions.
I just have one. And it's this concept of preservation. I mean, in your name, right? Preservation, what is, I guess, that's a fine. That's, I don't know, we don't want to, can't preserve everything, right? I want to be reasonable about this. I do not want an ultra modern building going up in our historic district, but preservation. We're not making people have thatch roofs because in the 1600s, that's what they had, right? And so what's your feeling on the ambiguity of the concept of preservation, I guess?
Well, those rehabilitation guidelines really, I think,
Yeah.
are the best.
Yeah. I think, we mentioned the four preservation treatment standards. One of them is preservation, and preservation standards do call for preserving much, just implementing a program of preserving as much original material as possible. Very, I wouldn't bell jar approach, but
The museum quality.
Yeah, right.
For museums.
we recommend that you use the rehab standards. Those are the standards that we city and just keep at them, you know.
The process is that the owner of the property that put up the fence has to call the zoning officer and say the job is complete and he can inspect it. Now, the owner does not ever have to call the zoning officer, so he may not even do this inspection. This is the procedures that we're following here.
I think your only thing now is just to maybe try to continue to approach the neighbor and see if they're willing to make
They are not,
changes.
they are
You
not.
know, I mean, if they got the COA and they're building it according to zoning regs, then. and, you know. Yeah.
I think we're going to adjourn our special meeting. And we will,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thanks for.
Should we take a brief recess before? we
Yeah, we're
start?
going to take a brief
And thanks
recess.
for.
5-minute break.
Eric, are you going to show up or are you going to just run the meeting from the? Is he still there?